Welcome back to the channel, students of the Force. The new Tales of the Jedi trailer has revealed several key elements and events from throughout the lives of several notable Jedi Knights from across the modern Star Wars timeline. We see glimpses of Ahsoka's training under Anakin, as well as her time on the run after the rise of the Empire and persecution of the Jedi. We likewise see Qui-Gon Jinn's early days as a Jedi Padawan under his own master, Count Dooku, and their collaborations with the young Mace Windu. But one particular shot of Dooku seems to have some disturbing implications on his tenure as a Sith Lord, and today we wanted to discuss just that. For just a brief moment, we can see Dooku fighting against Yaddle, the last known member of Yoda's species aside from Yoda himself, and this encounter seems to say one of two potential things about Dooku's character, as well as his backstory before giving himself over fully to the path of the dark side. So stick with us today, students of the Force, and let's explore the two primary options for what this means going forward, what this means about Dooku's life before his time as a Sith, and the idea that this one event just might explain one of his greatest known feats in Star Wars lore. First though, let's talk about the timeline of Tales of the Jedi. Tales of the Jedi appears to take place over two periods of time, one where Dooku is younger, and the second clip where we see him dueling Yaddle. As we learned recently in a Star Wars novel that followed a young Qui-Gon Jinn and an older Dooku, we learned that Dooku had already somewhat turned to the Force despite still maintaining his stance as a Jedi. He even on one occasion uses Force lightning as a Jedi in front of his young Padawan, meaning that Dooku's turn to the dark side was not immediate as it was in Star Wars Legends, but was far more gradual in canon, as we can see here with Mace Windu being shocked by Dooku's ferocity and aggression. Let's continue on with what it means specifically about this shot of him dueling Yaddle. Option number one is that this is a very important sparring session, which will later prove to be integral in Dooku's later life. If he is sparring against Yaddle, then it might indicate that his intention to surpass that of Master Yoda in terms of skill in lightsaber combat, seeing as Yaddle's dexterity and acrobatic prowess are very similar to that of the Jedi Grandmaster. Being of the same species and largely following many of the same practices, Yaddle would have likely been the closest available opponent to matching Yoda's style, utilizing the same flexibility and acrobatic tendencies that the Grandmaster himself used due to his size and stature of their race. Not to mention, we know that later on in Dooku's tenure as a Jedi Master, he also had frequent sparring sessions with Yoda himself, this giving us a clear intention of Dooku's plan. We know that Count Dooku was one of the shortlists to inherit the mantle of Grandmaster if Yoda were to ever meet his end within Dooku's lifetime, or were to otherwise step down as head of the Jedi Order, as Dooku was one of the most highly renowned Jedi Masters of this generation. He was only ever rivaled by a select few Jedi in terms of his combat prowess, namely Mace Windu, who we have seen a much younger version of in this trailer, and less well trained at this point in time, and then of course we have Yoda. Since Windu likely wasn't at the height of his power just yet, then it stands to reason that Dooku was next in line to assume control of the Jedi Order. If he were to do so, he would likely need to be the single best lightsaber duelist within the Jedi practice. We know that Dooku didn't outright disagree with the Jedi Order as a whole, but instead he disagreed with the policies and bureaucracy that had corrupted it internally. He didn't necessarily believe that the Jedi Order was bad, but that it needed to be rebuilt back to its former glory, and it stands to reason that he might have at one point attempted to usurp Master Yoda in some way, or at least prepare for a confrontation with him. If Dooku could take control of the Order, then he might have been able to address many of the concerns that he had with it, separating it from politics and disconnecting the Senate altogether. If this was the case, however, and he either challenged Yoda or considered challenging Yoda at some point in his life, then he could only do so by proving himself superior to the current sitting Grandmaster, and this might have been a practice to contend with Yoda for the fateful day when they may ultimately come to a full-form duel. The other implication, and perhaps the more disturbing of the two, is that this duel takes place shortly after Dooku's turn to the dark side and his decision to embrace the darkness. We know that Yaddle was present on the Jedi Council during the events of the Phantom Menace, as we see her judging Anakin's ability to be trained under the Jedi arts, but she is conspicuously absent during the events of the Clone Wars, and even the days leading up to the arrival after this conflict. After the siege of Naboo and the death of his Padawan and Qui-Gon Jinn, Dooku made several public statements condemning the Senate and their inefficiency with regard to how they ran the galaxy and served their people. What's important to note about this, however, is that Dooku was still a Jedi when Qui-Gon Jinn was killed, and was still a loyal member to the Jedi Order the last last time we see Yaddle alive in episode 1. His fall to the darkness seems to take place after Anakin was already initiated as a Jedi, and he didn't embrace Palpatine's teachings until sometime between the events of episode 1 and 2. If he kills Yaddle in this encounter, then it could explain her disappearance during the era of the Clone War, and could be an explanation for what happened to her after the first battle of Naboo and before the battle of Geonosis. Could deepen Dooku's betrayal and further him into the process of turning to the dark side. This would also explain why Dooku was able to contend with Yoda so handily when the conflict began on Geonosis. Despite being 80 years of age, he was able to duel the Grandmaster to a standstill after the Geonosian battle arena incident, causing even his master Darth Sidious to eventually fear Dooku's capabilities and wonder how far he could push the limits of his combat prowess. While Count Dooku is one of the best duelists in the galaxy, Yoda is a highly unorthodox opponent with a very unique style and skill set that very few people can replicate, mimic, or combat against. Over the years, we have seen hundreds of Ataru practitioners from all corners of the galaxy, and Ataru was not a strange lightsaber form in itself, but most of the wielders had relatively human proportions, making Yoda and Yaddle highly difficult to duel against because of their inhuman proportions. Many members of the Jedi Order are either human or share physiologies that very closely resemble the limits of a human body. Again though, Yoda and Yaddle are different, as their statures largely mean that they have to adapt their fighting styles in something much more bizarre, but are also a much smaller target, and it makes sense that Dooku dueling Yaddle here could be him preparing for Yoda if it is not their final confrontation if the timelines do not match up perfectly. Something I find unique about this is Yaddle is known for not wanting to draw her lightsaber under any circumstances unless absolutely necessary, and she is not noted in Star Wars Legends or in Star Wars canon for being an avid practitioner of sparring sessions, meaning that this clip could actually be Yaddle fighting for her life against a dark side Dooku and a newly burgeoning Sith. Or it could simply be Dooku preparing for an eventual duel with the Grandmaster himself. Either way, it means nothing good for the Jedi. But anyway, my friends, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on the two options that we proposed in this video? What do you think is exactly going on in this clip? Is Dooku preparing for an engagement with Grandmaster Yoda? Or is this the moment where Yaddle dies? And could this explain her absence from Attack of the Clones? As always, my friends, leave your thoughts and opinions on this down in the comments down below, and may the Force be with you.